Well, g'day. This is Iron Horse here, and this is probably the most random thing you might ever see in your life. I know, right? Because there's a whole series of coincidences that have occurred for you to be watching this here and now. And most of the ones that you think of being entirely as a result of your own existence, all the way back to your granddaddy's random one of billions and billions of sperms inseminating your grandmother. It goes beyond that. This is probably the most random thing you'll ever see in your life. And so anything that I have to say any further is neither here nor there, nor there or here. The wind is howling outside, and so as a result, because I couldn't be stuffed doing outside stuff, what happened is that over a series of events which are a result of a series of other events, as it turned out, I'm now living here in this place, and in this place in which I now dwell, I had a series of books, or boxes of books. And not only were they boxes, they were actually phone boxes. They were styrofoam boxes, which is not relevant to the story whatsoever. However, in my telling of the tale, I must say that they were styrofoam boxes, and so subsequently, since me moving into this dwelling, which is a shed, more or less basically, but it's a house that I live in, I've been going through the boxes, the styrofoam boxes, bit by bit, not in any particular sequence whatsoever, just finding one that says books. That's how I labelled it. I wrote on them, on the side, books. And so I've been taking a book, by box, and slowly, well, now my bookshelf is full. My bookshelf is full, my other bookshelf is full, and that bookshelf that's in the bathroom, which is the place we call our toilet, where I go and do my poops out my bottom and stuff. Well, recently, because I'm trying to reduce the number of boxes I've got, I've been increasing the number of books on my shelves. And therefore, subsequently, when I recently went and done a poop, and it surprised me by exactly how much poop came out. I was sort of expecting just a little bit, but quite a bit came out. I was surprised. And subsequently, because I accumulate books, I randomly picked this book off the shelf. You know, it looks like basically enough, and I was like, well, yeah, this is going to be an interesting book. And as you can see by the title on the cover, it's called, it's all in backwards, The Long Arm of the Cardinal. Gurney Slade. So I just thought, well, since I'm just sitting there pooping and I forgot to bring my phone with me, what I might do is just open it up and start reading. And the first page is like blank. That's like good use of paper. I'm doing this in real time, okay, so just bear with me. Second page is blank, and it still says The Long Arm of the Cardinal. I'm not going to keep on showing every page from now on. I'm just going to read them as I see them. So you can understand I'm not fabricating stuff up. And I didn't read this part. I actually jumped straight to the beginning and started reading. But I only read like 2 or 3 pages before I thought, you know what? I'm gonna sit down and read this random book to a random audience for no reason. And in fact, I did bring a beer, and this is the weird part. Before I even started this video, I went looking for the holder that holds this beer. I'm sure once I refresh my memory, it'll come back to me. It's called a oilcloth. It's an oilcloth holder made by the very fine people at Didgeridooners, who I suggest you should buy some of their fine products from. Very good products. And it's lined with lamb's wool, and it holds a long neck bottle in it, the one I particularly use. And so I went, oh, well, why don't I go get that stubby holder or long neck holder? And lo and behold, I couldn't find it. And this has been something that's been occurring to me quite a lot recently. So without any further ado, I'm just going to shut the fuck up. Stop talking about things mysteriously disappearing, how much I like to drink beer, and read what this story is about, and not do that anymore. To Guy Wren, and I have to say, I'm not a good speaker of the Frenchish version of vernacular. You can't call it French English, can you? No, you cannot. Varenne, Varenne. So would I say Varenne or Varenne? It's hard to say. But from here on throughout, there will be some French names which I will not be able to pronounce, and I'm just going to read them as I read them. So, and if you choose to listen to this story, be that upon you. To Guy Varenne, younger son of a Kentish squire, comes a thrilling experience when he saves the life of a refugee French nobleman. He is sent on a mission to France to find the Comte de Martelac's daughter and to retrieve a very valuable heirloom that affects the family fortune. Amid the colourful setting of the 17th century Paris and Provence, he passes through many exciting adventures, quitting himself gallantly, while over all hangs the sinister shadow of the all-powerful Recalou. Guy achieves his quest to find that he's been a pawn in the game of intrigue played by the Cardinal, a swinging tale of romance and adventure that grips one from start to finish. Well, see, I didn't even read that. I just started reading. I said I wouldn't do it, but alright, fine. There's a picture. See? Picture. Thing. Long arm, bloody shit and stuff. Gurney Slade. Frederick Ware. It's got the contents, you know. I never read the contents. I just dive right in. Chapter 1. Monsieur Arnauld throws the dice. To any reasonable horse used to Kentish roads in the year of grace 1621, there should have been nothing startling in the sight of a pony nibbling a tuft of grass by the wayside, whilst his rider, a boy of 14, cut himself a switch from an overhanging bough. But the big, raw-boned grey, coming suddenly upon this innocent scene at a bend in the road, found the spectacle entirely too much for his nerves. He shied, reared in an effort to rid himself of his rider, and, failing in that, sidled through a gateway and fled for safety across the open fields. Young Guy Varenne had only a glimpse of the grey's rider, a stranger, and by the look of him a foreigner, but he had noted his ease in the saddle and his calm expression when it seemed as if the frightened animal might rear too high and topple upon him. Whoever this man might be, he was a horseman and possessed of nerve. Guy turned his pony's head and galloped off in a wake of the runaway. Ahead of him, the big grey was pounding across the field, his rider sitting well back in the saddle and sawing the bit in a vain attempt to reduce the speed. Guy began to feel anxious. The field was wide, but the grey was halfway across it, making straight for the low hedge in front, and that hedge hid a ditch of a width and depth that might prove a death trap for the unwary. Guy shouted at the top of his voice, and the grey's rider turned his head. The boy waved to the left, where was a gap in the hedge and a rustic bridge over the water. But the grey was not in the mood for detour. Ignoring the tug on his rein, he forged straight ahead and, reaching the hedge, jumped viciously. There was a crash and a splash, and the horse and rider disappeared from view. Without needing guidance, Guy's pony raced for the gap, bustled through it with a snort of excitement, and tore down along the water's edge to the scene of the catastrophe. The grey, riderless now, was scrambling convulsively out of the ditch, and his master was lying half submerged among the reeds, bareheaded now, and with his long dark locks spread out on the water like the fronds of some strange aquatic plant. Guy jumped off his pony and ran to the rescue. It was heavy work dragging the man clear, but he managed it at last, and then, wet and panting, he was rewarded by seeing the victim of the accident open his eyes and look somewhat dazedly around. They were large, blue-grey eyes, holding a slight tinge of sadness, which Guy, young as he was, divined had nothing to do with his present plight. He was a middle-aged man with a thin, high-bred face and moustache and beard cut in the Spanish style. A foreigner, undoubtedly, but the country-bred Guy had no prejudice against foreigners, and he had an instinctive liking to this one. "Are you badly hurt, sir?" he asked solicitously. "A little. What you say, shaken?" "Yes," came the reply in a French accent. "In need of a glass?" "Yes. But the horse, he has run away with my one bottle. It is no great matter, though. I have not yet thanked you for your help, my good young sir, but in a few minutes I hope to be able to express my gratitude. You will excuse my delay." The Frenchman closed his eyes again and concentrated on the regaining of his composure. Guy rose and looked around. The grey horse, his ill humour temporarily dispelled by his fall, was not far away. With his bridle dragging, he was nibbling at tufts of grass. The grazing seemed to be to his liking, and he made no attempt to avoid the boy when he approached and began to rummage in the bags attached to his saddle. They were well-filled bags, and at the bottom of one of them Guy came upon a bottle and cup wrapped in a quilted doublet. Returning with these to the ditch side, he found the Frenchman still lying prone, but with his eyes open and a little more colour in his cheeks. "Bien," he said, as Guy uncorked the bottle and began to pour out the wine. "A little, my friend, if you please. A little, you understand, is better than much when one has fallen off a tall horse into a ditch." He took the cup, drank slowly in sips, and his eye brightened. Soon he staggered to his feet, and with an inborn politeness of his race and breed, thanked Guy once again for his good offices. There was a grace and elegance about his speech and movements that betokened a man used to good society. He treated Guy as if he were his equal in age and experience, and the boy's heart warmed towards him. He wanted to do more for this tall, drooping, but distinguished-looking stranger. "Do sit down and rest while I get your horse," he said anxiously. And the reader took a swig of beer. "And then, if you feel able to ride, my home is about 2 miles from here. You must come there and dry your clothes and have something to eat." But the Frenchman spread out a protesting hand. "My strength is returning now. My clothes will dry as I ride, and I shall be warmed within by the memory of your gallant services, Monseigneur." And again he bowed low, as if to a Dauphin of France. Then he fished his broad-brimmed black beaver hat from out of the reeds and, taking off his wide-topped riding boots, began to empty them of water. Guy secured the grey without much difficulty and presented the reins to his master. "We meet again," said the Frenchman, surveying his steed without resentment. "When next we part, I trust it will not be in such an abrupt manner." He mounted and turned to Guy. "I have not yet inquired your name, monsieur. It was remiss of me. 1,000 pardons. For myself, I am known, or intend to be known in England, as Monsieur Arnauld." "And I am Guy Varenne." "Then, good Monsieur Guy, with my bones in their present condition, it occurs to me that a walk would not be better than a trot or a canter, but do not let me detain you if you have other views on the matter." "No, I am in no hurry. If you are going to London, I can ride with you for a couple of miles, but I do wish you would come home with me." But again Monsieur Arnauld smiled his thanks, and spread out an elegant white hand in negation. "A wit Frenchman, Monsieur Guy. Is there any clamour for such in these parts? I doubt it very much. Whilst thanking you from the bottom of my heart, I am conscious that there is no such demand." Gaining the high ground, they rode side by side, Guy's pony breaking into an occasional trot to keep up with the long-striding grey. In spite of his recent mishap and bedraggled condition, Monsieur Arnauld put himself out to make that ride an agreeable one for his companion, and succeeded so well that it was with a distinct feeling of regret that Guy pulled up at a side road and pointed to the chimney stacks of a mid-Kent manor house showing above a clump of trees. "My home," he said, and the Frenchman drew rein. "Then it is here we part, Monsieur Guy, and for myself, not without a little sadness. I have a bad horse, it is true, but I forgive him, for his humours have led to my making the acquaintance of a charming young English gentleman, a Monsieur Guy. Forgive me, I did not quite catch the name." "Varenne." "Ah, yes, Varenne." Monsieur Arnauld inclined his head and was about to hold out his hand when he stopped and looked keenly at Guy. "Varenne," he murmured. "Varenne?" And he tried the name with its French pronunciation. "Can it be possible? But yes, there is a likeness. You will tell me, Monsieur Guy, have you among your illustrious connections a certain Lambert Varenne, who was once at the University of Padua?" "My father's name is Lambert. He studied at Padua when he was a young man. Why, do you know him?" "Yes, I knew him well," said the Frenchman slowly. Strange. He sat still on his horse and seemed to forget Guy's presence for the space of nearly a minute. Then he drew a small horn cylinder and an ivory dice from his pocket. "Your father is at home now?" he asked. "He should be. I left him an hour or two ago doing accounts in the library." "Then we will test fate still further." Monsieur Arnauld dropped the... I will state at this point that I haven't read any further through this book at all. And this is page 13, and this is where I decided I will read it to the internet audience. And so I probably should take another slug of beer. Oh yeah. And so, oops, I have to be careful not to put the camera down too low because I'm in a robe. I'm naked underneath. Did you know that you're also naked underneath your clothes? Oh, you cheeky bugger. Rightio, so I'll start this page again for the sake of my listeners, because I know you were so intrigued into the story that you forgot that I broke character and forgot to read the story. So, I'm so glad that came out the top and not the bottom. "Then we will test fate still further." Monsieur Arnauld dropped the cube into the container and began to rattle it in rather absent-minded fashion. He had played for many important stakes in his time, and this he considered a very minor one. for the question he was putting to the dice was merely whether we should ride on to London straight away, or tarry at this manor house near the Kentish village of Hallington for a half-hour's chat with an old friend of Padua days. Guy watched him, fascinated. The two made a strange picture in that moment. Monsieur Arnauld, with blood still oozing from a cut on his cheek, his clothes dank and dripping, his hair bedraggled like a witch's tresses as he sat on his raw-boned grey, rattling his dice box and gazing contemplatively at the chimneys of the manor house, and Guy, the well-groomed, sturdy English boy in his brown jerkin with a wealth of dark, wavy hair falling from under his felt velvet cap, while he leaned forward on his stout little pony to watch the result of a throw that, if they had known it, was to be fraught with destiny for both of them. Monsieur Arnauld upended the container into the palm of his hand and smiled as he glanced at the dice. It would seem, Monsieur Guy, that I am to have the pleasure of shaking hands once again with your father, if you'll be so good as to inform him that his friend Arnauld of Padua days is sitting on a damp horse on the London road. No, I will not come with you. I'm still a very wet Frenchman, and it would ill become me to drip ditch water on the furniture of your beautiful country home. Chapter 11, which obviously means 2, because chapter II. A count without a castle. Squire Varennes was still at work in the library, and Guy burst in with his message. "Arnold, Padua?" repeated the squire in slightly puzzled fashion, for those days were long ago. Then he gave a jump that shook the table and nearly upset the inkhorn. "Why not Arnold de Martillac?" "Martillac." "Quite likely," said Guy. "He seemed to think you would remember him." "Remember him?" shouted his father. "I should say I do remember him. The best swordsman in the university, and lucky for me he was on the spot when I got mixed up in a brawl in a back street one night. Where is he now, you say? Up on the road? Why didn't you bring him down? Wouldn't come? Nonsense. Fell into a ditch? Well, we all fall into ditches sooner or later. Here, get my horse saddled quickly. No, don't trouble. I'll ride your pony." And he hurried from the room. Within 10 minutes he was back again, accompanied by the Frenchman, and Guy, standing by the hall door, noted the evident pleasure that each was taking in the other's company. "Guy!" cried the squire as they dismounted. I think pages. "Run and tell your aunt that we have a guest, and an honoured one. He will have the room next to mine, and he will be staying for as long as we can persuade him." Thrilled and gratified by that last piece of news, Guy ran up the stairs and tapped loudly at the door of his aunt's room. Miss Ursula Varennes, the squire's sister, a lady of dignified mien and many capabilities, was at her usual afternoon task of embroidery when Guy entered. Seeing by the lad's face that he had something exciting to tell, she laid down her needle and rose from the chair. Guy poured out his tale, and Miss Varennes showed a concern. "Poor gentleman, I shall come at once." She went downstairs with Guy's and Matter brother and Monsieur Arnauld at the hall. The squire performed the introduction with some little ceremony, and Monsieur Arnauld, as he bowed low, expressed his apologies for intruding his wet presence into such a well-ordered home. Miss Varennes smiled graciously upon him. "You are very wet, Monsieur Arnauld, and you must exchange your clothes at once." She turned to the squire. "You will show Monsieur Arnauld his room, Lambert, and I will have hot water and towels set up immediately." "This way, my friend," said the squire, taking the gasson. "Guy, you can strip Monsieur Arnaud's saddle and take his horse around to the stables. Tell Jem to look after him well." "But not too well, I beg of you," said the Frenchman, smiling, "judging by his conduct this afternoon. I'm afraid oats have bulked rather too largely on his diet." Hang on. I missed... the... What do you call them quotes again? Them things that quotes? Quotation marks. "But not too well, I beg of you," said the Frenchman, smiling. "Judging by his conduct this afternoon, I'm afraid oats have bulked rather too largely on his diet of late." In his diet of late. So, yeah. I like this guy already. Old Jam, the stableman, sitting on a bale of hay, mending harness, looked up and whistled his astonishment when Guy appeared, leading the Frenchman's mount. Heavens, Master Guy, what have you got there? Guy explained, and Jem stood up to bestow an extra critical gaze at his new charge. I ain't surprised, not really, Master Guy, he confided, and gave an expert summary of the Grey's most glaring equine defects. Then, taking the bridle, he addressed the animal direct and with severity. Squire's orders are that you come in here and get treated well. Right, them orders will be carried out, but you'll please to remember that you're in God-fearing company here. Take a look around. You'll see horses here that could jump over you if you was standing up on your hind legs, and that'd make you think you was standing still if it came to a race. But one and all of them know their manners, and they don't rush about the country heaving people into ditches with them. I'm warning you, Mr. Bit in your teeth, not to try any of your tricks in these stables, or there are horses here, real horses, that'll see you go short a rib or two. This French gentleman shaved Squire's life, you say, Master Guy? Years ago in Italy. You hear that, Mr. Bolt over the meadow, said Jem Stanley. You've pitched the gentleman that saved Squire's life into a ditch, and now you're going to eat Squire's fodder. You be sorry and grateful now and start leading a life like a lamb right away. It was Jem's amiable habit to talk to his charges as if they possessed human attributes, and Guy, who spent much time in the stable, was never tired of listening to him. But today the counter-attraction of Monsieur Arnaud's presence proved too strong for him, and he hurried back to the house. There he found a scene of bustle, with servants ascending and descending the stairs, Miss Varan standing in the hall directing operations, and the squire diving into one of the great chests on the landing in search of suitable garments to lend to his guest. Before long, Monsieur Arnaud came downstairs in a borrowed suit of London cut, and looking very much a seigneur, to tender his thanks once again to Miss Varan and Guy, and disappear with his host into the library. There they talked long and earnestly, exchanging their news of the past 25 years, and the squire learned that his guest was now the Comte de Martillac. A count without a castle, said Monsieur Arnaud with a laugh. For a year ago I had the misfortune to kill Gaston de Falaix in a duel. I would probably say that's pronounced de Falai, because it's spelled capital V-E-R-L-A-I-X. So to pronounce that in the French pronunciation would be Valai, I would assume. For a year ago, I had the misfortune to kill Gaston de Falai in a duel. It was forced on me. I had some reputation as a swordsman, as you know, and this fool thought to gain fame by killing me. We fought on Easter Day, and that raised a hubbub, for he was a favourite of the Queen Mother, and that brought in Recolleau against me. I had to fly the... It says fly. I would have said flee, but I'll read it as interesting. I had to fly the country with what jewels and money I had with me in Paris at the time, and I was lucky to escape. I went to Holland, and I took lodgings in Antwerp, which I shared with an Englishman who had got himself into trouble in this country. To pass the time, I taught him French, and he interested himself in polishing up my English, which is a language that has always attracted me. When he died a fortnight ago, I had a sudden impulse to come to England. I'd arrived at Dover yesterday, bought an inferior horse at a low price, and set out for London. The rest you know. And what are your plans now, Arnaud? The Frenchman spread his hands and gave a shrug. Beyond finding myself a cheap lodging in London, I have none. My daughter, Lucie, now 13, is in a convent school in Paris, and she has friends, and those same friends will perhaps try to intercede for me with Recolleau. It's just Richielieu. Recolleau. for he's in power now, reaping the reward of his years of banishment with the Queen Mother. But, ma foi, I think that means his mistake, but I do not know French, so I just say, ma foi, they will waste their time. Ricolau's brother was killed in a duel, and he was never forgotten it. The edicts will grow stronger now, and there will be scant mercy for those that defy them and those who defied them. I will say nothing against Ricolau. He is working for the good of France, and if he lives, he will remould the country. But you, my friend, tell me more about yourself. You're a widower, like me. Yes. My wife died several years ago, and my sister, Ursula, runs this house for me now. I have 2 boys. Francis is 7 years older than Guy, and is now on the continent, attached to Lord Maybrook's staff. And you keep in touch with the world? More or less. There's good company in some of the houses around. I have a friend at court, too, and hear the news when it is a little old. Ah, yes, when it is a little old, and sometimes it is none the worse for keeping. You are wise, Lambert. You live in the country, but you do not become a vegetable. Monsieur Arnauld glanced around at the book-lined walls. If I had your wisdom, I would have made a permanent home of the Chateau de Martillac. But Paris called, and much of my time is spent there. He shook his head. A year of exile enables one to see things very clearly. One's past mistakes stand out like white-painted cameos. I have yet to meet the man who made no mistakes, said the squire. True, but the penalty varies, and when one is dealing with Ricolau, it is likely to be harsh. But anything may happen to a public man in France, suggested the squire. You would not shed tears, I suppose, if you fell into disgrace or were assassinated. No, my tears do not flow easily these days, Lambert, but as I say, my year of exile has taught me many things, and I perceive that Ricolau will do much for France if he is allowed to live. Henry of Navarre, our Henry IV, was a great king, a man of many gifts, which I did not receive reflected in his son, our boy, King Louis XIII. But Ricolau, the power behind the throne, will carry on in a Navarre tradition, whittling the power of the nobles and consolidating the power of the throne as a central authority. He aims at nothing less than the unity of France. The fortunes of such a man as myself mean nothing to Ricolau. If my plight should be drawn to his notice, he would remember that I killed Gaston de Valais on the Easter day, and waved the petition aside. He owes much to King Louis's mother, Marie de Medici, and would think twice before offending her by reinstating the man who killed one of her favourites. And so, Lambert, in your country I intend to be plain Monsieur Arnauld, a man with little money and no title. The squire nodded and gazed ruminatively at his boots, as if seeking in them a solution to his friend's difficulties. If you will excuse a blunt question, Arnauld said after a long pause, how long do you expect your money to last? At a rough estimate, 3 years, if I live very modestly in my London garret. And then? The Frenchman gave one of his expressive shrugs. Why, I might take a lodger or share the expenses of my room and subsist by singing and music lessons. Are you serious? Morbleu, my friend, when the prospect is black, one knows that it is black, and it is useless to tell oneself that it is golden. If I am alive in 3 years' time, I expect I shall still desire to live, and to live I shall have to earn some money somehow. I like this book. I've read this book before. I see. Well, that being so, Arnauld, I have a suggestion to make for you to accept or refuse as you think fit. My son, Guy, has been attending a local grammar school in Hallington, and it is time that he had more advanced tuition. I've been thinking of getting a resident tutor for him. The post is open. What do you say? Ah, Lambert, you had ever a kind heart. And an eye to my own interests, said the squire with a laugh. If the Comte de Martillac consents to act as tutor to my son, the boy can consider himself fortunate. His brother had 2 years at Oxford, but I'm thinking of a mercantile career for Guy. There's an opening for him in his uncle's firm in London when the time is right for him to take it. You look surprised, Arnold, but that is our way in England. As the eldest son, I inherited this estate, and my young brother went into trade in the city of London, where he has prospered exceedingly. And so it will be, I expect, with my own 2 boys. Francis will take over here, while Guy carves himself a fortune out of commerce. The merchants of London are justly famous and wield great power, said the Frenchman gravely. It is different in France. There, the younger sons have little beyond their swords for patrimony, and spend their days in lordly poverty, quibbling about genealogy and points of honour. I think, myself, your system is best, but in France, such an avowal would cause consternation. The squire, who'd seen something of French conditions, nodded understandingly. There was very little snobbery in the English rural districts. The dictum of Drake in the previous century, that he must have gentlemen to hail and haul if the mariners had had its effect. In the local grammar school, Guy sat at his lessons with the village boys and the sons of his father tenant farmers, where he owed the popularity far more to his prowess at games and facility in country pursuits than to his position as the squire's son. A mollycoddle from the manor house would have been treated with scant ceremony by the robust Kentish boys of that period. I like the boy, and I would teach him much, murmured Monsieur Arnaud thoughtfully. He has a merry eye and is quick and sympathetic. It would be an interesting occupation. Then you accept? With pleasure, said Lambert. With pleasure, Lambert. Pardon me. If you've been following, because whatever. We'll see what happens. Good. Let us have him in and see what he thinks of the arrangements. I'm sorry if I left that camera up so high that half the screen has been filled with it's alright. We're getting to chapter 3 in a moment. So you will accept with pleasure, Lambert. Good. Let us have him in and see what he thinks of the arrangement. Guy was not far away when his father called for him, and as he entered the library, he realized at once that something unusual was afoot. Take a seat, Guy, said the father. Monsieur Arnold and I have been talking about you. As you know, I've been thinking for some time about getting a tutor for you, and now, by a fortunate chance, Monsieur Arnold has arrived in England. He is willing to devote part of his time to your education. How do you like that idea? Guy's approval of it was so plain to see that both men smiled. A willing pupil, Arnold, said the squire. I can promise you an equally willing tutor, said the Frenchman. I like this book already. And I'm only up to page 25. Chapter I, or possibly 3. A lesson in deportment. Monsieur Arnaud quickly settled down as one of the family of the manor house, and soon attained a popularity with all classes in the neighbourhood, for he had sufficient good sense to adopt without question the conventions of the society in which he found himself. The descendants of the yeomen who had fought at Crécy and Poitiers would have resented any attempt at patronage from a foreigner, whatever his degree, but they respected Monsieur Arnaud as a man whose courage was vouched for by the squire, and whose skill in country sports and pastimes told of good and right upbringing in his own country. From the first, Monsieur Arnaud's relations with Guy were excellent, and under his able tuition the boy made rapid progress. Swordmanship, playing the lute, and singing formed part of the curriculum. He had a good voice, which the Frenchman took great pleasure in training. He had also a natural aptitude for languages, and at the end of the year was becoming fluent in French and Italian. "If you go on like this, Guy," said Monsieur Arnaud René, "we will soon be able to pass as a Frenchman." "I don't suppose I shall ever want to do that," Guy replied. "No, I don't suppose you will, but if you ever get thrown into a French ditch by a great horse, you will be able to thank your rescuer adequately. Consider what would have happened if you had been unable to speak English when you pulled me out from among the reeds. In response to your questions, I would have stammered, 'Ha, merci, monsieur. Gotten me on my horse and ridden on to London would have been a pity, I think, for both of us.' You forget, Monsieur Arnaud, that I could speak a little French that time." The Frenchman made a grimace. "Yes, you spoke it, Guy, but I could have understood. Could I have understood it? Was it as bad as that?" "Worse," his tutor assured him. "It was execrable. Anyone found speaking French like that in France would be put immediately into the Bastille." The unexpected arrival of Francis Varenne from the continent put a stop to Guy's study for a day or two, for the elder was deeply attached to his brother, and, not having seen him for 2 years, there was much news to exchange between them. Francis had come home from Italy by way of Paris, had stayed for a few months in the French capital, and was so well primed in news that Monsieur Arnaud was as eager as Guy for his company. So Francis, who had learned something of the tutor's history from his father and had taken an immediate liking to the aristocratic Frenchman, exerted himself to entertain. He had met the flower of French society in the salons of famous houses, had made his bow at the French court, and his tales of the Fontainebleau, the Louvre, and the Luxembourg, and of King Louis, the Queen Mother, and Cardinal Richelieu were listened to greedily by Monsieur Arnaud, starved as he was for first-hand news of his native land. "Your brother is a personage," the Frenchman remarked to Guy one day. "Wherever he goes, he will be noticed, perhaps because he does not desire notice. He dresses himself in good clothes and forgets them, which is an art. He can carry himself with assurance in court and camp. He walks into a room with the air of a young prince incognito." "He always did walk like that," said Guy with a laugh. "He can't help it. Is it natural with him? So much the better. He should go far. What are his ambitions? To see as much as he can of the world for a few years and then settle down as a country squire. He told me yesterday he wants to be equipped with knowledge and experience sufficient for him to be able to take part in a national emergency if one should arise, but that he has no mind to waste his time in petty court intrigues, scrambling and jostling with competitors more eager than he for place and power." "Ah," murmured Monsieur Arnaud, "he is even wiser than I thought." He closed the volume of Montaigne which he had been reading aloud to Guy. "Let us go and drink again from this young wisdom." I've got no idea how long this will record for, but I'll just continue. They found Francis in his riding clothes, just come back from a visit to his neighbour's house and talking to Jem in the stables. "I'm thinking of giving a Guy a few lessons in deportment, Francis," said Monsieur Arnaud, "but my joints are stiffer than they used to be, and I think he might be able to assist me. Would you care to give him a demonstration of the right way of entering a salon or anteroom?" "I can give you an imitation of the manner in which some of your compatriots make their entrée," said Francis, looking amused. "I watched some of them in Paris, and I found it as good as a play." "Excellent. We will combine instruction with amusement then. You have no objection to our using the stables as a salon, Jem?" "Salon?" Jem scratched his head and grinned feebly. "I ain't struck that word before, sir. What's a salon, Mr. Francis?" "A salon, Jem, is a reception room in polite society where people meet to discuss matters of importance and unimportance. It can be a room of high entertainment, low entertainment, or profound ennui." "And there you go with your foreign words, Mr. Francis," said Jem reproachfully. "You can't expect me to understand them, but you gentlemen carry on this salon just as I wasn't here. You want mine if I do a bit of raking, I expect. Oh, but we shall need you, Jem. What part shall we assign to him, Monsieur Arnold? He shall be the court favourite, the man behind the throne, the conveyor, if he wishes, of petitions. He is the ear of the king, and so is greatly flattered and courted, but he is so used to that his smile is mechanical, and all he says is, "Mais, oui." You understand, Jem? Said Francis. You're a very high-up person with lots of power, so you don't have to talk much. Just lean on your rake as if it was a gold-hilted sword and say, "Mais, oui." That don't sound too hard. Jem propped himself in his rake. But what does this "mais oui" mean? Much or little, according to the utterer, though it is ought to mean assent. But don't worry about that, Jem. Keep that pose. Look wise and say little. The play is yours, Monsieur Arnold. Please direct us. Thank you, Francis. This, then, gentlemen, is the anteroom of the Louvre. Those sacks of grain over there represent a group of gallants flirting with some young ladies. The implements leaning against the wall, a courtier is anxious to catch Jem's eye. The horses are court dignitaries, and the buckets yonder are pages. Bien. And now, Francis, will you go outside and make your entry? You have an acquaintance with Monsieur de Jem, and your object in presenting yourself this morning is to get him used to his influence with the king to procure you for the governorship of Forland. Francis smiled understandingly. These riding boots of mine are hardly suitable for the Louvre, but I'll do my best, Monsieur Arnold. He disappeared outside. Le Comte de Francois d'Arlington, announced Monsieur Arnold. Francis made his entry with an air of cool languor. Nodding with gentle condescension to the horses, he stopped for a little light badinage with the sacks of grain, paying two of them compliments on their taste in dress, past the buckets as if their presence caused him slight pain, tarried again for a little earnest conversation with the saddle, and then, as if catching sight of Jem for the first time, allowed a flash of allowed what looked like real interest to pass over his features. "Parfait!" exclaimed Monsieur Arnaud. "Watch closely, Guy. He will now make his way to Monsieur de Jem. Slowly he will go, but very surely." Guy watched, marvelling at his brother's artistry. Francis was indeed making his way towards Jem, but his progress was unhurried, and he lingered to make affable contact with some garden tools, inquiring after the health of spades and pitchforks, families, and extending his comfit box to a hoe. Then, coming at last to face of Jem, he gave a start of well-simulated surprise and pleasure. "Why, Monsieur de Jem, but how delightful to meet you again! I need not ask after your health, I perceive, and Madame de Jem and your charming family are equally radiant, I trust." "Mais, oui," replied the grinning Jem. "And His Majesty has slept well?" "Like a top, Mr. Fran. That is. Mais, oui." Francis flicked open the lid of his comfit box and extended it with an intimate gesture. "What am I supposed to do with this here?" asked Jem, inserting a grimy thumb-informed finger into the box. "Eat it?" Francis gave a well-modulated court laugh. "Ah, Monsieur de Jem, your aptitude for the jest is not waned, and I assure you that your mots are not quoted in Gascony and Provence with the same relish as in Paris." "Mais oui," said Jem, and removed a coke of mud from his boot with the rake. Francis drew nearer to him and whispered in his ear, "His Majesty is perhaps compliant with this morning." Read it properly. "His Majesty is perhaps in compliant mood this morning." Jem, getting a little tired of his mais oui's, tried to look knowing and continued his scraping, thereby drawing an applause from Monsieur Arnaud. excellent Jem is now beginning to act in earnest, he told Guy. There's little matter of the governorship of the Fernand, Francis went on. I might just get comfortable. I'm going to be reading this. There is little matter of the governorship of the Fernandi. Fernandi, Francis went on, insinuatingly. The post has not yet been filled, I understand. Jem shook his head. Lot of people after it, though, Mr. Francis. Just so, said Francis soothingly. Yet we understand each other very well, my dear. Monsieur de Jem. Aye, agreed Jem with a cackling laugh. It'd be surprising if we didn't, considering it was me who put you on your first pony when you're no higher than that bag of oats. This is the anteroom of the Louvre de Palais, Jem. So it is, I was forgetting that. Jem straightened himself again, leaned majestically on his rake, and prepared to go more fully into the question of the vacant post in the Farandi. Well, as I was saying, sir, there is a lot after this job. There's perhaps some little matter in which you are interested that requires adjustment, suggested Francis softly. For instance, my interest in the welfare of your youngest daughter is well known. Nothing would give me greater pleasure than to hear that she had made a match worthy of her charms and character. I was talking the other day to the Marquis de Montlazon, and we vied each other in admiring comments regarding your daughter. A very personable man, the Marquis, and unmarried, as you know. I told him that if I was so fortunate to secure the governorship, I should certainly request of you the favour of being allowed to add considerably to the dowry of the Mademoiselle Marie de Jem. He has learned, murmured Monsieur Arnold, and he can laugh at what he has learned. Bien. We understand each other then, but ever... My ever dear Monsieur de Jem, said Francis, but how vastly pleasant. He bowed and, moving sedately away, inclined his head slightly to a heap of fodder, accepted an imaginary comfort from a long-handled broom, and made his exit, flicking dust from his coat with the edge of his lace handkerchief as he went. Excellent, Monsieur Arnold, congratulating him when he reaped it. Without flaw. Guy, will you now endeavour to give us a similar performance? What? Me? Do all that stuff, talking to pitchforks and things? Your distress indicates your need of tuition in this matter. A gentleman should be able to rise to every occasion. Your brother, you will have noted, was perfectly composed at my request, and at once proceeded to make a refined anteroom of this stable. Well, I will have a try at it, said Guy dubiously. He did his best, but it was not a polished performance, and he broke down completely when seeking Jem's influence regarding the governorship of Ferrand. Jem shared his hilarity, and his loud cackle caused the horses in their boxes to turn their mild, inquiring gaze upon him. I would wish to remind you that this is supposed to be a court and not a gaming house, reprimanded Monsieur Arnauld. I think it is time that His Majesty appeared to quell the ribaldry, said Francis. Do you feel inclined to take the part, Monsieur Arnauld? If you wish, range yourselves, my subjects. Monsieur Arnauld waved them back to the walls, and with royal dignity began to make a tour of the stables, pausing now and again for a friendly word to a hoe or rake, passing others with a significantly set face, until he came to Francis, when he stopped again. A face I know, which has pleasing recollections, he said graciously. Your name, young sir? De Hallington, sire, answered Francis, with a deep bow, and ever your Majesty's devoted servant. Ah, de Hallington, from Mian. I remember, you did good service there. Your Majesty humours me by my remembering it. And this gentleman? Guy de Hallington, a kinsman of mine, sire, and greatly anxious to enter your Majesty's service. Ah, request, eh? Well, let us see more of him at court, and then perhaps I might find him a dozen musketeers and sufficient levers to pay his gambling debts. And with a good humored nod, Monsieur Arnauld passed on to the grinning and highly interested Jem. "Ah, Count Drake, I perceive," he said coldly. "I did not expect to see you." Jem looked surprised. "I thought you wanted me to be on this bit too, sir." Monsieur Arnauld turned and addressed an imaginary member of his chain. "You'll see to it, Grammont, that Count Drake loses no time in returning to his states in Armagnac." He frowned and passed on. Jem scratched his head in puzzled frustration. "Am I in it, or ain't I, Mr. Francis?" "Very much in it, Jem. For some reason or another you have incurred His Majesty's displeasure, and you have been banished to your country residence. You must have been dabbling in some court intrigue, and now you're paying the penalty." "Well, if that's the way they go on at court, bowing and scraping at hanging for jobs as governors, I'd rather live in the country. That I would, Mr. Francis." "Many wise men have come to the same opinion, Jem. What do you think about it, Monsieur Arnauld?" "There's something to be said for both sides." The Frenchman, the player, sat down on a bale of hay. "A court is necessary for a well-governed country, and the effects of it are felt in the most outlying parts of the kingdom. So it is well for young men of position to make their bow here and learn something of polite usage. The court sets the fashion and manners. It is the medium for diplomacy between nations. In England, your Queen Elizabeth understood court power and fashioned it for the influence of your country beyond the seas. In France, our Henry of Navarre, when he came to the throne, had a flair for the right mixture of robustness and elegance in his court. A good king can be his country's... What sort of tree? Oh. A good king can be his country's greatest blessing, and a bad one his greatest curse. Unfortunately, the court is a magnet which attracts the bad as well as the good, and in most of them intrigues flourished like weeds, as you, Francis, have evidently perceived. But to return to our little play, you have learned nothing from it, Guy?" "Yes, I've discovered that it isn't easy to talk naturally to a pitchfork." "Then that is something, one garçon. If you can preserve an elegant pose while talking gracefully to a pitchfork, you should be at your ease with the habitués of any court in Europe." And with that profound utterance, Monsieur Arnauld rose from his bale and led the way back to his house. And so we arrive at chapter IV, by which camera full. But since IV means fall, not fall. And if I displayed my genitals in any way, it was not intentional. Running up to page 38, it's been going for an hour. And so, if I'm going to continue on this book, I shall continue at another time. I bid thee